Hello, everybody, and welcome to Wednesday Wisdom. I'm Pastor Casanova Green, lead pastor of True Vision Christian Community. Now, I know you're like, man, Cass, it has been a while since you did something on Wednesday. Man, I missed our midweek gatherings. I'm like, hey, why not? So, tonight we're going to be talking about how we can secure our financial future. So, we're going to talk about a little bit of everything financial, budgeting, life insurance, things of that nature. Now, but I know some people might be watching this either immediately or in the future and going, oh, here we go. Here comes the church, another church talking about money. Here's the thing. We talk about how True Vision is an equipping church. And part of equipping involves us making sure that you're living your best life outside of the sanctuary, outside of these doors. And my goal personally is to make sure that you have more money than your month. I've been there. I've lived in poverty. I understand the struggle that many people face. And I know that I have a responsibility as a pastor and as a leader to educate you, to help you make choices that will not just benefit you, but also will benefit the generations that will be coming after you. So with that heart in mind, listen, if as we're talking tonight, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in comments on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Twitter, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. Now, we won't be on here for 1 hour. Tap your invisible neighbor and say 1 hour. So get your questions in, share this with a friend. Feel free to like, follow, and share. You can share this on Facebook, Twitter, and Twitter. You can email us to share it on YouTube. Send text it to some of your friends because we're about to have a good time. All right. So I'd like to introduce our guest tonight. He and I have actually known each other since high school. And he reached out to me earlier this year. We were just discussing and about financial future. He's taught me a lot of things. And I'm like, you know what? We should be open to speak to the church about. And he was like, oh, yeah. So, I'm excited. Hopefully you're excited to hear from him. And I'd like to welcome my friend, Pastor Trey's on the chat with us. Hi, Pastor Trey. So introduce my friend, Michael Gibbons.
Cass, thanks for the intro. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you here. All right, can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah. So kind of as Cass mentioned, we've known each other since high school. I graduated from D sales immediately after, started in the banking industry. I have spent 16 years in the financial industry. Most recently, once COVID started, I launched a financial practice. And that's kind of how I reacquainted myself with Casanova. And as we started to have a conversation, just very simple. What I do is really help people move to action on things that protect and benefit themselves and their families now and in the future. And I know those are challenging things to navigate because there's a lot of information out there. But personally, I like to just level with people, take questions, and just kind of give people just a little bit of a story to the why it's important, just to put a little bit of planning behind your financial foundation versus just kind of hope it all goes okay. And I think that there's a lot of misnomers out there that hopefully we can flush out through this conversation, and hopefully I'll be able to be of value to your community. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, we're glad to have you. So let's start. Let's start at the basics. What do you think people should have established um, to what is the first step for someone to secure their financial future?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the perfect question because it's a simple answer: budget. I think that when it comes to establishing your financial foundation, you have to understand, what you're spending and what you're bringing in, and kind of what waste or what could be eliminated. Because the tighter you can understand your budget is going to be the quicker that you can find areas to save, and then slowly diversify that into maybe investing and or insurance to protect loved ones, children, wives, spouses, things of that nature. But it all starts with budgeting, because you can't figure out where you want to go until you know how much you have to work with. And then that number will hopefully change over time. But budgeting is by far the first step, easily.
Okay, so can we dig a little bit deeper? Because we
Yeah.
hear there's like different budgeting. There's like the envelope method. There's like
Mhm.
Excel sheets.
Yep.
There's even apps. There's certain apps that will do the budgeting for you.
Mhm.
There's also the budgeting of hope and prayer.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, how do you advise your clients, or how would you advise someone who like has no idea how to do a budget? How would you help them make those first steps?
Sure. First off, I think the first step would be just figuring out what your monthly expenses are. So either, if you're renting or owning, that's going to be an expense, or if you live with someone and that's a free cost, that's fine. But you really have to get an itemized list of expenses. That way you have an idea of what's going to be going out at what time. Is it the 15th, the 30th? And then you'll be able to kind of use your income, which is going to come in at the same time every single month. And then you really will use just your expenses and your income to figure out, am I underwater? Do I have a little surplus? Do I need another job? Because ultimately that's kind of it. And the first step would be know yourself. Everybody's different. So, there's going to be people on the call tonight who are going to embrace technology. And this is not a plug, but I will say I use Truebill. It is a great app. You can certainly sync it up with your bank accounts, credit cards, your mortgage account, things of that nature. And it kind of automates everything. I do feel that those are secure methods of, starting to curate your budget, because the online banking security is the same as those apps. So it's very secure and connected. But that's one way to do it. It's certainly simple and easy because it'll do it for you. I am a paper and pen person, so I'm a bit old school when it comes to my budgeting. I like to be able to kind of personally break it down by each week gets a row. And then I do, 1 through 7, 8 through 14, and so on and through the end of the month. So I know what comes out what week. And then that's kind of rinse and repeat method, but I'm a visual person. And there's going to be people who the envelope method is the best thing, because they need to get it out of the account, put it in somewhere they won't spend it, and then they already know that that expense is taken care of. So it's kind of, you have to know yourself, and it's not a one shoe fits all. So it just really depends on your comfort level and how much time do you have, because it might take a little bit of time to look through a bank statement or two, just to kind of make sure you're not missing any of those subscriptions, because we all have more than one.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of things you kind of forget about, but pull your bank statement, itemize the expenses. It's already going to be on there. And then your income. And if anybody needs help with something like that, I mean, there's people like me who work for free to help people with that, because it's that important to do.
All right. Man, you're dropping some good wisdom tonight. Listen, if you're watching, feel free to throw in your questions. Just it's not going to be we're not going to do it like school. Any questions, throw them into the um, chat or comments. I can see you in real time. Shout out to Janae, Vic, and Pastor Eric, who's with us as well. What's up, y'all? Hi. Okay, so my next question is, we've gotten our budget together.
Mhm.
Um, we hear all these rules, like specifically with our savings, that we should have enough savings to last us 3 months, 6 months, all these things in case
Mhm.
the something unfortunate happens.
Mhm.
We also I know for me, I have secondary insurance to where if something were to happen, I get help paying for my medical bills. But my insurance also, like, if nothing happens in like 25 years, I get a lump sum of money. I'm like, let nothing happen. Brother got kids. So, what are your recommendations for like building a savings, or how much should we have in the bank?
Yep. And I think that's really important. And I also think, to start this part of the conversation off, I think it really is important to say you have to do what's within your means. Not everyone's going to be able to save $50 a month or $10 a month. So I think that's one thing you got to kind of really get out there is that everyone's going to start at a different starting point. But once you've got your budget set, you do need some sort of emergency savings because life will happen. You get a flat tire, someone gets sick, whatever the case might be. One of the things is without the emergency savings, you end up accumulating more debt. So in order to avoid that, people try to use a rule of thumb anywhere between 3 to 6 months. I'd say 3 months is kind of a good starting point. And that's going to be a different number for everybody. And when I say an emergency fund, I mean, you really got to make sure that you can pay your mortgage or your rent, keep the lights on, make sure your heat stays on during the winter, and you got to feed yourself. Obviously, now in order to get to the point of saving to have an emergency fund, there's usually an honest conversation about, what can I cut? Is everything a necessity? And if it is a necessity, okay. But if there aren't necessities, is there something that's a need that I can keep and eliminate some of my wants? Because that's the other challenge is people are going to say, well, I don't have an extra, $300, $400 a month. It doesn't take $300, $400 a month. I mean, you got to start somewhere. $10 a month is a great way to build some discipline because it feels good at the end of that month to say, okay, I saved $10. 2 months later, if you have 20, that feels good. So part of, I think what I would stress to people is putting yourself in a position to have some small victories along the way, because the whole financial process is a long-term perspective. It's a long-term game. So I definitely think that, if you can get to 3 months, great. And if it takes you 8 months to save up 3 months of expenses, so be it. If it takes you a year, so be it. Don't beat yourself up. Know that you're on the right path and you're making progress.
That is so true. I mean, savings. I can just say from personal experience, like having a savings has saved my wife and I several times. Like it has come in handy. Okay, so what advice would you give to someone who may be in severe debt? Like, say credit cards have gotten them, or they're not able to pay their bills, or they might be in wage garnishment. How can they navigate creating this budget, doing these things while dealing with these financial hardships?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think a lot of people are likely teetering somewhere on that line of, a real serious hardship has occurred. One of the best things I think someone could do from the jump is be honest with themselves about what they can actually accomplish. I think we play a lot of, mental games that are really counterproductive when it comes to trying to get our finances together. I'm sure that, if you're, let's say, living paycheck to paycheck and you had a financial hardship, you got to get new brakes on the car. You can't not have them. That's going to cost you $700 you don't have, or $400. Where does that $400 come from? Some people might have to go to a check casher. Some people use a credit card. Others might have lucky enough money in a savings account. But if you're in a situation where you're financially, paycheck to paycheck, it's really tight, and that hardship appears, you have no savings, one of the best things to do is try to reach out to a family member or a friend first, or a church community, because if you can try to prevent yourself from incurring more debt that's going to cost you interest that you are already going to have a challenge to pay back from the start, that's a tough position to get out of. I think that there's going to be times where, God forbid, credit card debts are in the 40, 50 plus range. Paycheck to paycheck's not even a thing. You're short 4 days before your paycheck comes. Those are hardships that happen for lots of people. And to get out of those situations, there has to be, again, an honest conversation about, what are my expenses? Where's the money going? So your budget, because that's going to let you know to kind of keep you true and accountable to what you need to do. And the next thing's going to be, okay, well, it's going to take money to get out of this. Am I going to make enough to get out of this within the next decade? And if not, what are my other options? And so debt consolidation is an option. There's a lot of debt consolidation companies out there, be very careful who you work with. Make sure you do your reviews, do some due diligence. And a worst case scenario, if someone's just too buried and the pressure's mounting, I mean, I think there's obviously recourse through bankruptcy, and there's alternative ways to try to figure out how you can scale down your debt load and or eliminate part of it. Sure, there's going to be some consequences to a decision like that, but I mean, we're all human beings, so we got to kind of let ourselves off the hook and realize sometimes, you got to go backwards to go forward. And if that means maybe your credit might not look good for 7 years, or it's going to be tough to borrow, or you might not be able to get a home or buy that new car. Those are things to think about. But if that's not in your near immediate horizon, sometimes you have to do what you have to do. And I don't think there's any stigma that should be around that. People deserve a way to get forward. And so there's lots of different ways. And again, talk to someone like myself to try to weigh out options, because sometimes it could be, and I actually did subprime lending for about a year and a half of my life, where we lent to a lot of people who were in hardships, and a lot of the lending was debt consolidation, and just had someone sat down with them and like budgeted with them, they could have done a lot of that themselves without incurring more debt, paying us at very high interest rates, had they just kind of broke down their budget and just tightened the belt buckle a little bit. And I mean, so there's a lot of different variables in there, but talk to someone who you feel you can trust and just have an open conversation with, that you don't feel judged by. That way you can be honest, and then that's going to yield really good results.
All right. So so we've talked about the present. Now let's look like a little bit ahead. So now this is something that we really should probably discuss, especially in the time of COVID. We've seen a lot of situations to where a person sadly passes away, and the family has to resort to GoFundMe and other fundraising platforms to cover end of life expenses as well as care expenses for the family. Can you take some time to discuss the importance of life insurance?
I sure can. Yeah. I mean, I think this is a topic that has a lot of static, is maybe a good word to put out there, because there's going to be a lot of information. I think that life insurance plays a role in almost anybody's life. I think there's a couple of different types of life insurance. So just to kind of, in a nutshell, there's renting and owning life insurance. So it's term insurance, which is more like renting. There are cases where you can be able to get your premiums back at the end of that term and things of that nature. And then there's permanent life insurance or whole life, which is something that you own. You pay for it. You can always call them and tell them that you're done paying, and you'll always own a piece of that for life. But kind of to answer your question, it really just comes down to just a little bit of planning and understanding kind of what you can do. Final expense insurance is one option, very inexpensive. Term life insurance is another option, very inexpensive. If you're a single individual, I mean, you might not need much if you're not owning a home, or if you don't have assets that you need to cover for family or spouses and things of that nature. But you can certainly get your foot in the door for probably the same amount that we pay for one of our subscriptions to a streaming platform. Also, life insurance has evolved a lot in the past, I would say 7 to 10 years. I would very much encourage anybody who is married to immediately have that conversation with their spouse to say, look, I know it's not a fun topic, but God forbid if one of us didn't come home yesterday, how does the other one of us move forward? How do we make sure that the house stays intact? How do we make sure that both the cars stay intact, or do we sell a car? How do I make sure that my last quarter of tuition gets paid for? There's lots of different what ifs. And I think that people can just have those conversations with somebody they can trust. Both partners need to be together, because this is a shared experience. And then I think, just to kind of add the next variables, when you have children, then I think that kind of like heightens everyone's awareness that, God forbid, if something happens, now there's people who might not even be able to provide for themselves personally due to age or due to either disability or any other circumstances that might not, allow them to provide for themselves in the future. And so I think when that occurs, it's very important just to know that you have options. Life insurance isn't made, it doesn't exist to make people rich. It exists as a risk transfer mechanism to say, God forbid, if something happened to me, how does my family stay intact? And I think that the best way to prove kind of like the value of why you should protect your family is the GoFundMe accounts that we have all seen over the last 2 years, frankly, the last 5 years. And I don't bring that up because someone's at fault for something that they didn't do. I bring that up because I think there's just so much misinformation out there, and there's no clear way to understand who can I talk to, what's it going to cost me, and can I trust that person? I mean, that's the ultimate thing. And I only do this because, believe it or not, Casanova is the one who kind of introduced back in when he graduated high school. We were in Columbus at Horizon Science Academy, a little charter school, and that was my first stab at financial literacy. And that was the little seed that Casanova watered 16 years ago that kept me in finance, because I don't come from means and I'm not a materialistic person. But what I learned in finance, because someone like Casanova said, hey, by the way, people need this information. And so I started to teach financial literacy. And one of the things that was very clear to me quickly was there were a lot of adults who were getting the children's work that I talked to them about, and they had questions. And it was from that simple financial literacy pitch that Casanova gave me that I stayed for 16 years teaching people that it's not exactly what you think. Life insurance, again, has changed a lot. One of the most important things to think about is living benefits. So living benefits covers the categories that we don't like to talk about: a really bad diagnosis, an accident, a chronic illness, terminal illness. God forbid, a disability occurred because you got injured. Those are life-changing events that will completely interrupt your income stream. And when that does occur, not only is your income going to get interrupted, but then there's going to be additional expenses brought on by a healthcare cost. And so having something in place to be able to shoulder that burden of that cost is going to be important, particularly if you have a spouse or you have children as well. So, and again, these are very simple things. Most of my conversations when I talk to clients for the first time, they take no more than a half an hour. So I think it's about leveling with people and letting them know that there's options for them.
Right. So I want to throw this out there for you.
Sure.
Man, like, y'all talk about life insurance is all good, but my job offers life insurance, and I pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
Can we talk about how the fine print that comes with that?
Sure. Well, I guess I've changed jobs in the last few years. I don't know if anybody else has, but I mean, COVID leads me to believe a lot of people probably have. So if your employer offers you life insurance, nothing wrong with that. It's a free benefit, or it's usually like, $1 a month or something. They're extremely inexpensive. But once you leave that employer, you also no longer have insurance. And when you do leave that employer, in order to carry on an insurance plan, it's going to be an extremely expensive monthly cost, and you're not going to be necessarily prepared to take that on. So then you can go from being insured to uninsured very quickly. I would also encourage anybody if they do have those types of benefits to take advantage of that. It might be your annual salary or 2 or 3 times your salary, whatever the case might be. But those group plans are important because that could be an extra benefit that may or may not ever be utilized. But if it is, that is going to help your family be able to, cover the final expenses. And if you had something that you actually paid for outside of your employer, then no matter if it's term or permanent, either way, you're going to be insured. You have the flexibility to leave your job. You also have the flexibility to protect your insurability, because what's the other thing that we also learned during COVID? You could be good one day, you could get sick, and then that might prevent you from qualifying for insurance down the road. And so now you might be in your 30s, decently, perfectly healthy, right? But because of one event, you might not be disqualified. And so now you won't be insurable. And so that's kind of the other thing I really wanted to touch on is the fact that if you can get insurance, it's easier to get it when you're younger and when you're healthier most of the time, because as we usually age, our health, I would say, just becomes a little bit more complex. And so because of that, the cost goes up and the probability of getting declined goes up. And so I think that, it's, again, this is not anything that should be overwhelming or threatening, because the employer plans are something that people take advantage of and never think twice about. But buying your own insurance is something that people, they question. And I would say, to kind of bring this full circle, you mentioned at the top of the hour that you had a supplemental for your healthcare. So, it kind of helps you out. I mean, that makes sense because it's transferring the risk. So if something did happen, it's not going to have to come out of your pocket. It can come out of an insurance company's pocket. That's kind of the same thing I'd want people to kind of connect when it comes to life insurance. Our lives are the most valuable assets that we have because it's how we generate our incomes. So it's kind of funny that we have insurance on our cell phones, but I mean, some people make money on their cell phones, but most people don't make their living on their phone. I know that people love having insurance for their cars. Their cars get them to work, but God forbid if your car broke down, you'd figure another way out. So, I mean, we only have one life. And once that has some sort of unforeseen circumstance happen, I think that is a very large impact to a budget and to an income. And transferring that risk with a living benefit on a life insurance plan is extremely important. And I mean, I think ultimately, to make one more point, is you never know how long you're going to be sick. It could be 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years. So if someone's unfortunately sick for 6 months or more, I mean, that's going to be a substantial impact to their budget. So it's just simple things like that I think that if people can have a conversation with, they could be more confident in taking action for what's going to be better for themselves and their families.
All right. So one more question about life insurance. So there's different insurance amounts.
Mhm.
What would you recommend? What amount should we get? Should someone get for life insurance?
It's a good question. The best way to kind of answer that is to say, think about it from two different perspectives. What does your household look like? And if it's 2 adults, no kids, then you might say, okay, what are our assets or what needs covered? Is it a homeowner situation or a renter situation? So you kind of have to figure out what assets do you have, and then how much income did you want to replace? And so when I think about it from my perspective, I have one child, she's 3, I have one on the way. So for me, I look at it from the perspective of, I would take my income and say, I want to make sure that, God forbid, if I died in the next 25 years, something would happen and go to my family. So I take my income, multiply it by 25 years. Because and I do that saying, I want my kids to go to college. I want my home to be paid. I want my wife to be able to grieve and pull herself back together and then be strong for our children and make sure that they have the resources to move forward. Mm-hmm. And God forbid, if I didn't come home tomorrow, 6 weeks from now, 6 years from now, to me, it doesn't make a difference. Something has to fill that gap.
I totally agree. All right. So again, if you're watching this, first of all, how y'all still watching? If you're watching this, if you have questions, please leave them in the comments. If you're watching this in the future, you can email us at admin@truevisionlancaster.org. Mike and I talk constantly and be like, hey, we got another question. If we get enough questions, we might do this again. So let's talk. So now that we talked about the morbid stuff, let's move a little bit into like the future. Mm-hmm. There are we have to think about retirement, right? I don't want to be working until I'm 80. I thought I told my wife, I said 65, I'm done. But I have, thanks due to my profession, I can do that. But what would you recommend to somebody who, they don't have that built-in retirement? What steps should they take?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think that we all are kind of aware that the days of the pensions are really almost gone. I don't want to say they're completely gone, but it's slim. Um, we all obviously know 401ks exist, and we all know that Social Security is around. How long it's going to be around is the question. But I think that one of the things that people should really start to think about is there's always going to be a future income gap. And that's a universal problem, particularly for people who aren't financially independent. Um, and what I mean by a future income gap, you know, let's say a person, first scenario, person worked a traditional job, had a traditional 401k, they were able to put a 4% a year and get a 3 to 4% match. One of the best things that that person can do is understand that they can either increase their contribution to their 401ks, because at a later date in the future, could be 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road, they're going to want to retire. And during retirement, their income is going to basically get cut off, and then whatever they saved in a 401k or a 403b or any other retirement accounts, plus their Social Security, is going to be what they have. Typically, it's like 60 to 40% less than what you're making, because no pension, no 401k is going to kick you out dollar for dollar your annual income, particularly in the last 5 years of your earning years, which are going to be the highest earning years you have. So one of the things that like we would say in the profession is like your first dollars saved become your most valuable dollars later. So again, it kind of goes back to the emergency fund conversation we were having. To me, it doesn't matter if you're saving $10 a month into a retirement account, $50 a month, or 10,000. Something is always better than nothing. Compounding interest is the eighth wonder of the world. and two, if you can just start early enough, you can cut down your monthly requirement for that target if you start early. So what I mean by that is, if you have the ability to bump up a 401 contribution or contribution from 3% or 4% up to that 7 or 8%, that's gonna be helpful in the grand scheme of things, because anytime you can get to 10% or plus of your income being socked away into a retirement account, and that 10% can consist of you putting away 7% and getting a 3% match by your employer, equaling out 10%. Because you really have to try to get up into the teens when it comes to putting dollars away for retirement savings, because you need the long-term compounding interest to really go to work for you. And then also, I think there's a lot of different investment vehicles. So that has all changed. A lot of get-rich-quick schemes out there. I personally don't peddle or promote anything like that. Last time me and Casanova talked, I was pretty adamant that there's a lot of things that people need to be aware of, and the type of accounts that they use for the retirement accounts are important. There's going to be various different accounts, but they all fall under like two different categories. A variable account, which is going to be pegged to the performance of the markets, and those accounts will go up and down. So it's great when the market's good, but it's not good at all when the market drops. And then they're going to be fixed accounts. They give you maybe a little bit lower interest rate, but they protect your principal, they protect your investments. And then they have a third, which is kind of a hybrid. They call them like indexed annuities or fixed index accounts, which kind of try to give you the best of both worlds. They peg it to the market performance. So if the market does really well, you can get great returns, sometimes even double digits. But if the market drops, you don't lose a penny. All the interest previously credited to you is perfectly safe, and all your principal is perfectly safe. Now, those accounts, I think, are far more suited to people who need to make sure their forever dollars are safe. And I mean, if you're saving money today, for 25 years from now, I'm going to call that forever money. And so one of the most important things that we want to try to address as advisors is, how do I provide my clients with guaranteed lifetime income? Because that's ultimately what we're all trying to figure out how to do. And so there's a lot of different ways to do that. But everybody has different goals. Everyone has different priorities and different budgets. So it's kind of again, I'd love to talk to anybody who's interested in trying to figure out what a one-on-one conversation could look like that's tailored to their needs. But certainly take advantage of any free match that you have at your employer. If they offer you free money via a match on any type of retirement account, try your hardest to at least put the minimum in to get that match. That's the most important thing you do as a step one. Step two would then, again, budget, emergency fund, and then figure out how you can fill up some additional retirement buckets that you can utilize in the future. Because really, retirement, all it is trying to figure out how to carry on a similar lifestyle that you had before you retired, but by making less money. And I think it's a hard concept for people to wrap their heads around. Same lifestyle on less money. And so it's somewhere that income gap, like I said, is universal for most people who are not financially independent.
So I've never asked this question. I've never even thought about it till now. Are people able to have multiple 401ks or 403bs or?
Not necessarily 401ks or 403bs, because those are employer sponsored
Mhm.
plans. So those are employee retirement plans, but you can have, IRAs, which are individual retirement accounts. You can have annuities, which are another individual retirement account that then can be turned on for a stream of income later. Obviously, we all know of mutual funds, stocks. So there's lots of different types of options. But certainly when it comes to the 401s and the 403bs, those are just employer-based plans. Now, if there's any self-employed or entrepreneurs in the crowd, obviously they have various different options as far as various different types of IRAs. And there's a lot of other planning that can be done for self-employed individuals because they're self-funding the retirement. And there's usually some sort of analysis that's going to be done around healthcare costs and things like that.
All right. So I know my church, really, our church, True Vision, serves a lot of people who are dealing with lower incomes, who might be on disability, who might be on a fixed income,
Mm-hmm.
and because I've thought about this, really thought about this, and it kind of governs how I run the church a little bit. How can people, or what advice can you give to people who, they're listening to all this stuff, yeah, this is all fine and good, but I only make this much because I'm getting this assistance. What can they do to make those steps to ensure that there is going to be some form of a financial future?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question, because I think what you just highlighted is the group of people who need the help the most. So I have always thought in my financial career that the vulnerable and the people who have a little bit less than others need more support, need more guidance, and need more truth and honesty around what they can do. Because banking taught me one thing: who actually knows where their money's going? Someone who lives paycheck to paycheck, because they're tracking every single penny. I mean, they know because they have to know. And so I would add that one more thing to that. They also know that if anything was to happen, they're in some trouble financially. And so, again, one of the most important things in someone in a situation like that, if you can qualify and for life insurance, having something that can have a living benefit to try to take that risk off of your plate and give it to an insurance company, that is important. And I get it. That's not necessarily a future stream of income, but those are the things that really send people into bankruptcy, and that just derails families is medical expenses. And when something happens, particularly to the person who was earning the benefit, doesn't matter if it was Social Security, disability, it doesn't matter what the benefit is, but whoever's earning that benefit, if they were to pass, then everybody who is dependent on that benefit is in a much worse off situation. And so I don't think that it's always, I just don't think it's always fair to try to help people develop income streams in the future, because obviously their money is needed today. But I do think that if there is ability to say, doesn't matter if it's $10 or $60 a month, if there's some ability to say I can afford something, if I can qualify for it, getting a living benefit in place is to me a really, really big benefit. Because between Social Security and, God forbid, you've already had a lifestyle that was kind of on a fixed income lifestyle, there might be some slight change. But if earning an income through an employer wasn't part of the equation, let's say it was a government program or a local program or a charitable organization, your income's not going to dramatically disappear when you retire, quote unquote. But it's the unforeseen emergencies or medical situations that then create the $50,000, the $150,000, $200,000 bill that doesn't get paid for by the insurance company. Like, those are the things that people, I think, really have to try to avoid and look out, because you can't try to turn $4 into $6. It magically won't happen. But if you can say, okay, my $4, but maybe in 3 months I can make it so that out of that 4 I can save the 2, and maybe get yourself into a position to be able to protect you and your in your health and your life through a plan that can take care of any unforeseen expenses through medical care. Because that's to me the biggest burden that I see in the financial industry, is how do people cover costs when medical situations occur. That's the biggest detriment. And I've watched too many people try to give away everything they know to qualify for things, and that ends up biting them because of the look back periods and things like that. So I definitely think that if someone is in a situation of saying, Mike, I'd love to do this, it all sounds great, I don't have 2 nickels to rub together. Well, talk to me. Let's get a budget. And then I'll talk to you from a realistic perspective of how long does it take. And it might not happen overnight. It might not happen in 2 weeks. It might take 6 months of prep work, working on a budget and checking in to keep people engaged in their financial future and empowered that they actually do have control and power over it. So
awesome. So we've covered a lot of stuff tonight.
you had some great questions.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so let's get back to the concept of savings. Can we just discuss this? Mm-hmm. Your mattress is not a savings account.
It's not. God forbid the house catches on fire.
Right. Your floorboard is not a savings account. Because we all got a savings, and they kind of reach in the underwear drawer to the left, just right. Can you briefly talk about the different types of savings accounts and how they work and how they could be beneficial to people when they're like, hey, I want to start that savings?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, just your no frills savings account, just your typical savings account in a bank. I think that when I look about savings is a process that's built on discipline. It's sure you have to have a little bit of extra money in order to save, but it's the discipline that's going to get you to finding those dollars. And so when it really comes down to it, just a basic savings account would be good enough for most people. Savings accounts aren't meant to earn you interest. They're certainly not going to help you get rich, but it's a place to keep your money safe. I mean, banks carry insurance on all deposits. So you get your $250,000 of FDIC insurance. So it's not going to go anywhere. It's safer than being in a mattress or your home. And in addition to that, it's the discipline. I think a lot of people are different. They might say, Mike, but I like to shove $10 a week in the sock drawer. I've been doing that for 32 years. If it works for you, by all means, I'm not going to tell you to change. But if you're struggling to figure out a new routine and you're trying to as we all are kind of reintroducing ourselves to the post-COVID life, if you're trying to start a new routine, go into your bank, ask the bank teller or a banker, hey, I'm interested in opening up a savings account. I'm sure they might have a $10, $15 requirement to start it, but just pick a target that you find realistic and make it actually doable. It cannot be a lofty goal. It can't be the whole New Year's resolution, I'm going to lose 30 pounds. Like, how about you focus on losing 5 pounds? Like, hey, I'm going to save all this money. Okay. How much have you had saved so far? I don't have anything saved. Okay. Well, why don't you focus on saving $5 or $10? Because it's funny how the psychology behind it, that little victory of getting that extra $5 in the savings account, that feels good to people. And if you can do it again, then you start to believe that there's more you can do than just saving $5. And so you kind of have to realize that savings is discipline, but discipline is really kind of taught and shown to people when it comes to finances, because there's a lot of information out there that would say you got to be rich in order to save money, or you got to be rich in order to save for your future retirement or to get life insurance. And I think that's not necessarily true. I think that people probably pay for more in subscriptions on a monthly basis, and they could take care of a lot of different financial needs for that same amount of money. So I would just encourage anybody looking to save, start with the basics. Don't get overcomplicated. Parents try to tell us to buy the Toyota Corollas for our first car because it's reliable and it's easy to drive. Once you get that down, then you can drive the sports cars. But until then, keep it basic, keep it simple, because you need the victories. It's the victories along the way that are crucial to that whole, it's a momentum, all the momentum gained. You need the momentum when it comes to the finance, because it's an emotional thing. And we all know that. That's why none of us talk to our friends about all of our money and our bank accounts. And we don't air our laundry out like that because it's personal, private information. So therefore, in order to kind of outsmart yourself, you got to put yourself in a position to win. You have to have victories, and they don't need to be defined by somebody else. You have to define them yourself.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we're nearing the end of our time together, but there's one more thing I want to ask you about before we go. I was talking to somebody earlier, actually. We were discussing, changes, and we were talking about, everything that's going on. Mm-hmm. And they said they have never checked their credit score. Okay. Can we talk about that for a second?
Yeah.
Why is it important to at least have some knowledge of your credit score?
I mean, today it's most important for, it feels like everything. So anybody ever done a rental application? They ask for your social security number. You know why? Because they're pulling your credit. So renting an apartment, getting a car. I don't think it has much to do with education and student loans per se, but any type of lending in the U.S. financial system is going to be pegged to credit. I mean, so really what it comes down to is you have to have established credit first to have credit. So one of the misnomers is like, you're born in America, you get credit. No. If you never had a credit card, you never had a loan, you don't have any credit. Like, your cell phone does not get reported to the credit bureaus. It's mainly credit cards and installment loans. Anything that's like a utility or a bill that gets reported to the credit bureau is only reported when it's severely delinquent. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important to keep tabs on your credit, because not only is it your purchasing power, but it will be the determination of your interest rates. And we all know that it's unfortunate, but if you have lower credit, you're going to pay higher interest rates. So you would think that if you had lower credit, they might give you a break because you need it. It doesn't work like that. It's the opposite. They're going to kind of make sure they remind you should have taken a little bit better care of your finances. So now we're going to have to charge you a higher interest rate, effectively charging you more on a monthly basis. And those are things that people can work on. Again, when you want to establish credit, best way to do it is to keep it simple. I personally have always told people this, and I'll always continue to say it. Best way to do it, get a credit card, Try to get one with a very small line of credit, $300 or less. And then I always say, use it to pay the things you are already paying for on a monthly basis. So if you're paying your electric and you're paying your gas bill, maybe only put those two things on that card for the first 6 months and pay it off every single month. And on top of that, if you go get a rewards card, you can not only pay off that every single month, build your credit, you can get free money.
Mm-hmm.
So there's free rewards out there. If you don't want the money, you can have airline miles. You don't want that, you can have hotels, whatever you want. But there's definitely an advantage to putting yourself in a position to know where your credit score is. And anybody who might be listening that says, oh, well, my credit's not very good, ask yourself this. Do you have any major purchases you're looking to make in the next 6 months? If the answer to the question is no, you're probably all right. That gives you time that if you're really frustrated about your credit, reach out to somebody and they can start to walk you through some processes to try to clean up your credit, repair your credit. Again, certainly look out for debt consolidation companies that will be knocking on your door with their magic wand to make sure it all disappears and you'll be okay. But what they might not tell you is they can settle with the creditors for less than the balance due, but it's also going to destroy your credit at the same time. So again, I think it's all about what's the situation, kind of what your budget look like, and can we get ourselves out of it in a decent frame of time? And if not, we might have some other options. But Credit Karma is a great, it's super popular, but it's a great free resource. I've used it for years. I've always encouraged people to use it. It's certainly better to double check where your credit is before you walk into any type of bank or car dealership, because you don't know what they're looking at. So if you have no idea where you're at, you can't defend yourself. You can't say, there might be a mistake. You can't challenge anything. You're at that point, you're just kind of helpless because you're going to have them dictate to you the terms of whatever it is you're talking about. So it's empowering. It gives you a little bit of position to say, yeah, I've checked my credit. It's pretty darn good. And most people then have to be honest with you, because if you know what your own credit's like, they can't give you bad news that's not accurate.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good to know, but again, it really just depends on time horizons, major purchases, and what do you need it for.
All right. Well, y'all, I said an hour, and I'm a man of my word. We got about 5 minutes and some seconds left. You have any parting words for everybody who's watching?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I first off say thank you for anybody who attended now or who watches this in the future. I certainly have built my whole life around the fact that I believe giving people access to true, honest financial advice that can help them make decisions to benefit themselves or their family. It's honestly one of the most important things that we can offer people outside of, I'm never going to do open heart surgery. I am not a doctor, but I unfortunately know that money is kind of the center of how we can make the rest of the stuff in our lives happen. So I think about this all the time, and I will always encourage anybody, don't hesitate. Casanova has my information. No question's a bad question. No budget is too small. If you believe that you matter, I do too.
Awesome. Well, if you want to get a hold of Michael, you can go to and give us at appreciationfinancial.com. See, I had that queued up. He'll be more than happy to speak with you and work with you. Again, the goal of tonight was helping you pretty much have more money than your mom. And be able to make wise decisions for your future and to help you get to wherever you need to go. Because people be prophesying, you about to make $1 million and you can't work with $100. So this has to help you and help us, because I've learned a lot. I know a lot of stuff he's talked about I can vouch for, because my financial situation has been a roller coaster in the past. I've been at the bottom, and we working our way to the top. But it's good to have these reminders and good to have all this information. Again, because God calls us to prosper, and prosperity is not being rich. It's about having more than enough. So So
That's
you have
right.
that savings, praise God, hallelujah. All right. If you enjoyed tonight, we want to do these more. I'm hoping to be able to do these once a month with different topics. So if you're interested, you're saying, "Hey, Pastor Cass, I would love for us to do these." Hit us up. Go to our website, truevisionlancaster.org. You can contact us there, or contact us on our social media. And if you have any topic ideas, any suggestions, we would love to hear from you. But again, I'm a man of my word. I said 1 hour. So thank you all, Michael. Thank you so much for your time. We really do appreciate it. Hopefully,
Absolutely.
once Rona chills, we can have you down here in person.
Absolutely. I'd love to come visit. So I appreciate the opportunity. And again, I wish everybody the best.
And thank you all for watching. God bless you all. Go in peace, knowing that you're loved.
Mhm.